Hello guys, welcome to the Art of Server. In today's video, I'm going to be replacing the backplane of this system here. If you've seen my other videos, you might recognize the system. This is what I call the Flash, and it's a system. It's the first system that I built dedicated to flashing HBA cards with IT firmware. And this machine has worked great, but I've been looking for ideas to reduce the power consumption of this machine while I'm flashing the HBA cards. And so the backplane that this system currently has is what's called a TQ backplane, and basically it has a dedicated SATA port for each hard drive port. And this is a Supermicro 836, so it has 16 3.5-inch drive bays. So there are actually 16 of these SATA cables that go to 4 SFF 8087 SAS cables. And this is what I've been using to test all the HBA cards that I sell on my eBay store. Every card is fully tested with all SAS lanes connected. Now, the reason why I'm changing out the backplane is because I've picked up this guy here recently. And this is the, let's see if I can get it in the camera for you. It is the BPN-SAS-836TQ there. So this is a expander backplane, and that means that there's this chip over here that basically acts like a network switch for SAS communication. And instead of having the cables connected to each individual port, this would have the cables connected to the SAS chip or the SAS expander chip, and then the SAS expander would then communicate to all the hard drive bays. And the reason why I'm considering this is that I can actually detect the number of SAS connections from the HBA to this SAS expander. And so the reason I test all the SAS lanes is to make sure that all the SAS lanes on the HBA cards I sell work, right? So if I have it connected to the SAS expander chip instead of individual hard drives, I can validate that the connection works by simply seeing that it connects to the SAS expander without actually having hard drives. And so I'm hoping that that's going to help save me on power consumption, because right now there are 16 hard drives in here that spin up all the time when I'm testing and flashing cards. And so as you can imagine, however much wattage each hard drive takes, multiply that by 16, easily adds up to over 100 watts, I believe. So I'm hoping that by using this, I'll be able to reduce the power consumption of this box when I'm doing the testing of the HBA cards. So I've never actually replaced a backplane on the 836 before. So this is going to be kind of new to me, but I'll bring you guys along the journey here, and I thought that this might be useful for somebody who might want to do the same thing. So yeah, so actually along those lines, you can buy a Supermicro 836 machine for fairly cheap if you get one with one of those really old backplanes. So in particular, there is a SAS1 version of this backplane that's very unpopular. And so those machines tend to go for a really low price. And if you can find yourself the backplane, you can basically get the rest of the chassis for a really cheap price and then swap in a better backplane, and you have yourself a fairly nice modern machine. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with replacing the backplane. So I'm going to have to remove a lot of stuff here to make some room, and I'd like to for the sake of this video, I want to clear out some extra room so that you guys can actually see what's going on, so I don't have my hand like over everything, so you're just going to see my hands. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the mid-plane fan bracket here and the entire thing, so that I can get the cables out and have plenty of room to show you what's going on down here. As for tools, I don't really know. Like I said, I've never done this before, so I'm just kind of guessing, but I've got myself a fairly long number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, and this is magnetized, so that's always comes in handy. If you drop a screw, you can kind of pick it up with a magnetization. And a lot of times the screws here are really hard to reach, so I've got myself a little 1/4-inch ratchet with a Phillips number 2 bit in here. And I have an extension just in case I need that, but I can also remove the extension, and so I can get into very low clearance places and remove some screws that way too. So we'll see what I need. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I haven't done this before. We'll find out. And this is a Channellock, let's see, 748 plier, and I love this plier. If you like Channellock, you'll probably love this too. But in general, I got this initially to work on cars for pulling off electronic plugs. You know, the plugs in electronic cars are usually very tightly fitted together because they have to withstand vibration and all that stuff. And so they're really a pain in the butt to take apart when you're working on a car and taking apart the interior or something like that. And then one day I discovered these Channellock pliers, and I tried them out, and they work wonderfully for pulling electronic plugs. And so I'm going to have this around just in case something, probably maybe some of the Molex power connectors might be a little tight or something. I can use this to pull that. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start with removing the fans. Them aside, and in order to remove this fan bracket here, I think there's 2 screws over here, but I have to unplug the PWM fan connectors here. So let me do that first and just pull them through. Okay, that's the first one. Here's the second one. Third. Okay, so those are all disconnected now, and let me come over here and get to, so there's screws under here. They're shoulder screws that sit on some rubber bushings, and that dampens the vibration from the fans or isolates it. Okay, that feels like it came out. And this one you can probably see a little bit better. Alright, so yeah, these are little shoulder screws, and this part that has no threads is where the rubber bushings sit on. So once you get those off, I believe this should just pull out. Alright, so that's out of the way now, and let's see, can I get the rest of this out? I'm not really sure. I might be able to, but it seems like it might be a pain to remove this entire bracket. So you know what, at this point I'm just going to try to get the SATA cables unplugged first and see how this goes. If I need that extra room, then maybe I'll worry about trying to get the rest of this out. Alright, so this is where this comes in handy. Yeah, really love these pliers. They're not very expensive. So again, these are Channellock 748. So get yourself some of these if you're working on cars or servers and stuff like that. It's great for unplugging cables that are hard to reach. Like this SATA plug at the very bottom is very hard to get my hand down to the bottom to get a good grip on that. So I'll just use this to kind of grab it gently. I'm not applying a lot of pressure on the pliers, and just pulls it right out for me. Okay, I've got everything, all the SATA plugs disconnected. Oh, and I'm going to disconnect the sideband plug here as well. I think there's 2 of these. Oh, here's the other one. Okay, so at this point, let me see if I can get these cables out of the way. Oh, there's another sideband. Actually, there should be 4 of them, since I have 4. Alright, so those are the other 2. See if I can get this out. The hole here in the fan wall is pretty small, but you know, at least they folded the metal over here so the edge is not really sharp, so you're not gonna end up cutting cables. I really like that. Alright, let me just pull each of these SATA plugs through one at a time, and that'll help me get it through. Now these cables I'm using are Supermicro branded cables. I think they're made by Molex or Amphenol, and if you haven't noticed, they have these really thin wires that are really, really nice for routing. I mean, for one, it kind of just stays out of the way, and it's easy to manage, but trying to get these through small, tight holes like this also makes it really easy that they're rather thin. So, you know, all 4 heads here might not go through easily at once, but because the cables are so thin, if I just pull them one at a time through, it gets right through that hole without much fuss. Alright, so that's one cable that's out. I'll put that aside. And let me go ahead and take this other one out. By the way, if you're looking for forward breakout cables like this, I've got them in my eBay store. So go check them out if you want to get them from me and support my channel. Alright, so I'll just redo what I did earlier by pulling in these SATA plugs one at a time through the hole. And that makes it fairly easy. Alright, and one more to go. So let me just kind of pull most of this through. And then I'll just pull each individual one. At this point, since most of the cable's been removed, there's a bigger opening, so it gets easier and easier. Alright. Okay, so all the SATA cables are gone. There's this little foam thing that sits here against the cables to kind of block the air from flowing back into the backplane area. Okay, next the Molex power connectors need to be removed from this, and these are usually pretty tight. So yeah, you know, I'm going to use those pliers again. This is one of those places where this thing really shines. So not applying a lot of compression pressure, just kind of lightly grabbing it, and just like that. It just makes things so much easier. Alright. Okay. And one last one. Alright, so that's all the power connectors, and I'm going to have to cut those zip ties because I think for the expander backplane that I'm putting in, all the power connections are on one side, so they're not spread out like this. So I'll have to release these Molex connections, or at least maybe 2 of them or so, and put them over here. But anyway, I'll worry about that when I get there. Trying to figure out what I need to do to get this backplane out. So there are power connections here. This is for, I think, the optical drive, and there's one here. I think this is for the USB and serial port thing that goes in there. So that is disconnected. So I think all that's left are the screws that are actually holding the backplane. Now, one thing to note, this backplane is sitting bare. And you'll notice the backplane that I was showing you earlier here, this actually has a frame on it. And so the way this attaches right now is a little bit different than this. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I lined this up earlier, and I think the holes for the screws are mostly the same. Let me see, actually it goes around this way. So there are screws right here, which there's a hole here, there's a screw right there, there's a hole there, there's a screw right here, and right here, and right here. So the holes seem to line, these, at least the 5 holes on top seem to line up pretty well. But there are these, the screw right here that doesn't have a corresponding location on the new backplane. So I might have to just remove that. You know, but this also isn't the screw that is screwed on. It's like a, I don't know what you call it, but kind of like a shoulder screw, because it's just a screw where you slide the backplane on. So if you were just removing this and you weren't planning to install this backplane, the other backplane, you don't actually have to remove the screw at all. You can just remove the, I think, the top 3 screws, and the rest, yeah, I think the rest are just shoulder screws that you can slide the backplane off of. Alright, so to get to these screws, it's a little bit harder to reach them because there's not a lot of clearance here. That's why it would be easier if I could remove this, but this looks like it's riveted in, I suspect. On other Supermicro servers I worked on, this is actually screwed in. There are screws holding this side, but this other side looks like they're rivets. So, I don't know. That might not be very easy to remove, so I want to try doing this without removing that bracket. Yeah, so this is where this comes in handy. Make sure I have it in the off position. So I can put this in here. Yeah, there we go. Once it's loose, I can just spin it with my finger and take it out. Right. Do the one in the middle. Alright, so once it's broken loose, I can just spin it with my finger. Oops, I don't want to drop it. There we go. And third one here. These are not very tight, so once you break them loose, it's pretty easy. Okay, so I think those are the screws that I need to remove. Let me see if I can move the backplane now. I think I just have to slide it upward. Let me see. Are there any other screws? No. Yeah, let me see if I can slide. Don't see anything else that's holding it down. And by the way, I've already removed all the hard drives. So if you're doing this, make sure you remove all your hard drives first, because otherwise the hard drive SATA or SAS connectors will be connected to the backplane, and if you try to move things while those are there, you might end up damaging either the backplane or one of your hard drives. But I've already removed all the hard drives, and I'm just trying to figure out, well, let's see. I'm just going to loosen these screws. These don't look like screws that are there to hold, but I'm going to just loosen them just a little bit. Maybe there's just enough friction in there that, let's see. Okay, so I've loosened the two top ones. There's a third one here, and there's also a fourth one over here. Let's see if I can get this to move. Not quite. Alright, let me also loosen these up a little bit then. That extension aside. Let's see. Well, that was already pretty loose actually. So maybe this middle one. Okay, so they're all loosened up a little bit now. Oh yeah, okay. So now the backplane's moving. Let's see. Yep, there we go. Alright, so there was just a little bit of friction on those. But like I said, you don't have to remove, I mean, I'll probably have to remove them in order to put the expander backplane in, but if you're just removing this backplane, the TQ backplane, they slide right off. The heads fit right through. And do the same thing on this side. Oops. Alright. There we go. I think the backplane's loose now. And let me see if I can just wiggle it out. Alright, almost there. There we go. Wow, this has gotten pretty dusty. I don't have this machine running 24/7. It does run several hours a day when I'm flashing, but it's accumulated some dust over that time. I guess I'll give this a cleaning later on. Alright, so I think we're ready to put in the new backplane, but like I said, the attachment points are different. I don't need these shoulder screws for this backplane, so let me go ahead and just remove those entirely. And then I just noticed that the new backplane's frame looks like it attaches to these threaded holes on the bottom here, and I don't have the screws for that. Alright, one more. Okay, so I think that clears the way for the new backplane. I've got some rubber bits here from let me get rid of that. Alright. Yeah, and like I said, I'm going to have to disconnect some of this. Alright, let me get some side cutters to cut that. Alright, I've got myself some side cutters. I'm going to cut the zip ties here. This is not where I'm going to need these Molex plugs. Zip tie out of there. Okay. So I'll leave that around. I'll leave these Molex plugs. I don't know which one I'm going to use. Probably the proper thing to do is to use 4 different ones or 4 connections that are on different rails perhaps, but you know, I'm not really using, well, I'm not plugging any hard drives in this now if the backplane idea works, so I don't really need to worry about that too much. Mainly I just need to power on the expander chip. So anyway, let me just move this aside. Let me just tuck it back here, keep it out of the way for now. Alright, so let's see how this backplane is going to go in. I think the attachments for these top 5 holes are going to be pretty straightforward. Looks like I have attachment points to these threaded holes, the 3 on the bottom. So I don't have screws for that, but here's a tip for you guys. If you're working on Supermicro servers, buy a bag, and they come in like a bag of 100. Buy a bag of the screws for the 3.5-inch drives. And the reason I say that is that a lot of times, and I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to try it and find out. So I guess you'll find out in a second here, but a lot of times the screws that are used for the chassis are those exact screws. So if you just have a bag of the 3.5-inch hard drive mounting screws from Supermicro, they come in really handy if you're working on Supermicro servers. I really like that Supermicro kind of standardized on that one screw that's very commonly available. And so if you're ever missing anything, just pull out one of those hard drive mounting screws and see if it works. So I've got a bag of those that I'll have to pull out a little later, but I'm going to try to mount this backplane in first. Okay, so just to kind of avoid the cables, I'm going to go in at an angle here, and let's see, does that get me in? You know what, can't go in at an angle. The frame isn't going to go in, so let me have to kind of go in almost straight for everything to fit. Alright, I think that cleared it. There's just a lot of cables around here. It'd be easier if these cables weren't everywhere, but that's what I got. Alright, just go down gently. You don't want to damage these SAS connectors. Alright, that looked like it dropped in, and the holes line up perfectly, so I just have to get the screws and plug all that in. Alright, and it turns out this is actually just for a SATA drive connect, so I don't even have that here anymore, so this cable is really unnecessary. I probably should just remove it entirely. So I'll just let that hang out there for now. So let me figure out how I'm going to mount. So I've already got 3 screws. I've got these guys that I took off from the first backplane. And so let's see if I can just use these two. You know, these don't look like they're long enough. So I'm going to need longer screws. This backplane is just a lot thicker. Yeah, I don't think these are going to work. Yeah, I'm going to need longer screws. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, so I went and looked for some screws. I found these are usually for mounting PCI cards. They're or hard drives too, I think, in old computers. And I think these are going to work. They look like they have the same thread, but the threads are a little bit longer on this, so that should help me mount this. So let's give it a try. Alright, I'm going to start with the middle hole, and I'm just going to use this Phillips head bit to just finger screw it in, and yeah, that looks like it's going to fit. So I'm not going to tighten this down too much just yet, because sometimes the alignment on the other holes are going to be a little bit difficult if I screw one down too tightly at first. Yeah, that looks like it's going to work. And let's try this. Yep. All right, let's do the corner here. So you'll notice that something I learned, I guess, when I was working on cars a lot. Whenever I screw something in, I like to kind of go backwards until I hear the threads kind of click, and then turn it forward from there. So I'll turn this backwards while applying a little bit of pressure, and you hear that click, and that's when the threads are kind of meshed up. And then I'll turn it forward. On this, it's not such a big deal, but in certain car parts, man, you screw up the threads. I mean, I guess you could try to repair the threads, but sometimes the parts are really expensive. So, well, I guess this is, I mean, perspective. I guess it's a relative perspective. This is not that cheap either. All right, so I've got those 5 screws on top in. I'm going to reuse those 3 screws that I took out of the old backplane that were in these top 3 slots, and I'm going to try to use them on the bottom. I think they might fit. The thread pitch and size is the same, and these are a little bit shallow, but I don't really need anything as long as I did on the top here. So let's see. I'll do the same thing. I'll rotate backwards. Okay, then I hear the click, and tighten that down. All right, yeah, that looks like it'll work just right. Okay, one in this corner. Wait a second. All right. And one more to go. All right, so 3 bottom screws are tightened down already. I'm going to go ahead and tighten the top 5 with the ratchet. Let's see here. There we are. Okay. Okay, those don't need to be super tight, but I just wanted them a little bit tighter than finger tight. And look, this backplane also has the same connectors. Now, I already took out the other cable, this one that I guess I realized I'm not using. So I'll leave that out, but I can plug this in here to get power to that, I think the optical drive there. All right, so I think that's it. So now I have an expander backplane on the system. I'll have to figure out the power plugs. That's fairly simple. And then all I need is then a SFF 8087 cable from here. I'll be using the 2 links here towards the back of the system, and I'll use those cables now going forward to test the connectivity of the HBA cards. And so long as they show that there are 4 links per cable, I'll know that those SAS lanes work without actually having to spin up some hard drives. So anyway, I hope this video helps you guys out. For anybody who is replacing a Supermicro 836 backplane, the procedure is probably going to be very similar. Today I had a TQ backplane that didn't have a frame in it, took that out and installed a EL1, or this is the BPN-SAS-836 836EL1 backplane that does have a frame. So I guess one thing to note I just learned is that you're going to have some screws, because the screws with the TQ backplane will not be enough. Those 3 screws work great on the bottom here to hold the bottom of the frame, but the top you needed, I needed to get some extra screws there for that. But those screws are the same threads as 3.5-inch hard drive screws, so it's not a hard screw to find. And in fact, these were hard drive mounting screws that I had laying around. Oh, one more thing, guys. I just wanted to show you how much I love these pliers. Okay, so I'm trying to plug in these Molex power connectors into there, and this is a tiny gap. I mean, I don't have huge hands, but I can hardly get in there, right? Like trying to angle this, and this is not, you know, the most flexible thing. So I'll use these pliers to grab this like that, and I can pretty much manipulate this easily into the spot, and just have to align it. A little bit of patience to get it aligned. See here, almost. Yeah, there we go. Now that's aligned, and I'll release this and just grab the back end here and use this as leverage, and just press on this, and that goes in right there. So yeah, I absolutely love these. These are great for manipulating electrical plugs, stuff like that. Just like you saw right now, it saves you a lot of time. So yeah, love these pliers. Channellock 748. All right, just wanted to show you guys that. All right, so hopefully you guys find that helpful. If you like this video, please give me a like. All right, and be sure to subscribe to see more videos from me. All right, thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.